Hi everyone, this is the second part of my Friday afternoon video. I was talking about the changes in the last 10, 12, 15 years. It's kind of hard. It depends on where you're talking about. Because this acceleration that I'm describing happens more or less rapidly depending on where you are. And I think you can figure out that obviously in New York and Washington and Chicago, it goes really fast, and elsewhere maybe by and large not so fast. Although, I mean, the essential change is in fact completely universal and completely global. And sort of what I'm trying to say here, or what I am saying rather, is that the aspect of professional correspondence that used to be somewhat impersonal and mechanical often is not anymore. And the ability to, or the possibility to express yourself, the possibility of personalizing things is really important in business. And I think very often people get sort of lulled into thinking that they have to be quote unquote professional, officious, and kind of dull. Whereas, yes, I mean, I want to, have a caveat. Sometimes that is in fact, what you have to do. I mean, it's the nature of the job. However, especially in vital, energetic, metropolitan areas, the possibility for personal expression and the possibility for outreach is just extremely important, and it's something you really, really, really want to think about. And as our course evolves and as we move beyond the simple sort of one-off type memos and very short reports, I want you to keep this in mind. I don't want you to bend over backwards to be dull. On the contrary, I want you to be creative, innovative, and interesting. Now, let me sort of say something very much in passing here that I'll come back to, and that is, I think in many ways today, writing and the ability to communicate in the various forms of writing, email, reports, and and so on and so forth. There's a lot, and we're going to basically be doing them all the important ones. I think that they are the royal road to promotion in today's professional world. And sometimes this is less true. Sometimes it's more true. Now, okay, so I want us to be conscious of that. And as I set up the assignments for the next part of our course, I'm going to be coming back to this all the time: originality, creativity, personal self-expression, research about the deeper dimensions of of what you're writing about. Okay, I'm not saying you have to research, your own job right now. I wouldn't say that at all. So the other thing, or one of the other things I wanted to quickly mention in this video, is that as you're doing the COM 210 assignments, keep this in mind, please. And that is that in today's environment, whatever you write can easily be forwarded to people and organizations that are all but impossible to anticipate. So thus, when you're writing for like a particular purpose or a particular person, you want to keep in the back of your mind that, hey, let's say you're writing for your supervisor. This is the classic simple example. You're writing for your supervisor. Keep in mind, yes, of course, you're writing according to the expectations of the supervisor. You don't want to posture. You don't want to get silly. You don't want to seem overly ambitious. But keep in mind that your supervisor, if she likes, what you're suggesting or what you're writing, might flip, that is to say, might forward your message to who knows where, to Frankfurt, to Delhi, to Shanghai, to St. Petersburg, Russia, who knows, any because there's sort of infinite possibilities, and you might think, oh, that's not going to happen to me. I'm not important enough, or I'm not at that stage yet. Well, I wouldn't think along those lines, because remember, part of what a supervisor does is being a talent scout and looking to grow his or her employees, and so if an employee is doing a good job, very often they'll send it beyond, who knows where, and you can't really anticipate. It can be many different possibilities. So the idea here is you want to make sure that there's really two things here, and I mention these when I review your papers all the time. And in part, what I'm doing here is explaining why these comments come. Okay, first of all, the people who are reading your correspondence might not be totally familiar with, say, the geography of New York. Okay? And so you have to be very careful to make your documents intelligible for someone who is not next to you in the carrel, okay, or is not necessarily completely and perfectly familiar with the detail of your work. Now, this takes some practice, okay, and it's something that it's a little bit touchy and a little bit tricky, because once again, you don't want to grandstand. I mean, I'm not saying that at all. And by the way, there's a lot of noise outside right now. They're doing work on the road, and I hope that doesn't disturb you. I can never tell, what this video cam is picking up. So, in any case, you want to make sure that your messages, reports, documents are, sort of generally intelligible. Okay? Now, there's another point that I want to make, and then I'll conclude, and that is, as you're writing today, one of the things you really always need to do is to put yourself in the position of the person reading the document and assume that they're reading fast. Okay, let me repeat that, because it's not perfectly obvious. And in a lot of books on this subject, this does not come out. They sort of, what they do is not so important, but the point here is that just as you're writing, assume that people are going to be reading your material very fast. Okay, so you have to bend over backwards to be really clear and not make assumptions. Let me give you one of the most prevalent errors that tends to occur. Someone will refer to last week. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean anything to anyone else who's outside your little area. So dates have to always be precise. Okay, and if you're talking about something happening, you always want to be very clear about where it happens. Okay, so once again, then the third thing that is very important as well. At the end of your correspondence and at the end of your reports, make sure that, first of all, your reader knows where they can find you, the best way to contact you, and when they can best contact you. And you have to kind of spend some time getting good at being very succinct here, because you don't want to hit them up with nine sentences. Oh, sometimes I'm sick and I go bowling. Okay, and it's not that, but you've got to figure out to give them your basic schedule and your basic contact. And if if your cell phone number doesn't work, don't give it. Don't say don't phone my cell phone, but just make sure your best point of contact and your best contact information are very clearly articulated. The final thing that I want to say here is that in almost all cases, offer to phone, and think. Always assume there might be a misunderstanding, and always assume that misunderstanding might be your fault or your organization's fault. Okay, and if you do that, I think that you won't make very many mistakes. Actually, there's one more thing that I wanted to say really very quickly. The other thing is keep in mind when you're communicating with either your clients or your colleagues, depending on the case, that one of the advantages of email and one of the advantages of contemporary communications is you've got 2 and 3 and 4 shots. Once upon a time, you're writing a letter, you were probably sending it as a registered letter, and you sort of had one chance to explain everything. Today, and it's exactly the opposite. You kind of, I don't want to say the minimum, but you want to be very concise, you want to be very incisive, and not necessarily explain, and above all, don't justify too much, okay? Because you, in almost all cases, anything that's relatively complex, you're going to have 3 or 4 or 5 emails, or 15 or 20 emails to clarify with or about. So this takes a lot of pressure off you. Basically, I think by and large, a light touch and always a little bit friendly works best. And once again, always offer to reach out, always offer to give them a call if they want to talk to you. This is kind of, if there's any edginess or if there's any trace of animosity, this will usually reduce it to pretty close to zero, because they see you're not just dismissing them, but you really want to communicate. So that's kind of the moral of this whole story, the conclusion that I want to bring us to. That is, you always want to connect with your audience, and you want to think about your audience, and you want to take them as what you are. That is, a real person and serious about the job. Okay, everyone, have a great weekend. And as always, we've got a little bit of wiggle room in terms of the due dates. I don't want to rush anyone. I don't want anyone just rushing these things out. I want you to take your time and do a good job. If it takes a couple of extra days, frankly, as you know already, all the better. Okay. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it, everyone.